Repeatedly riled, the Prime Minister faced unwanted questions in Japan about his Home Secretary back home. Rishi Sunak will speak to his independent ethics advisor about whether Suella Braverman broke the ministerial code in her handling of a speeding offence.
I don't know the full details of what has happened, nor have I spoken to the Home Secretary. I think you can see firsthand what I've been doing over the last day or so, but I understand that she's expressed regret for speeding, accepted the penalty and paid the fine.
Also tonight, Ukraine's president is defiant. Bakhmut is not under Russian control. Moscow says differently.
It is possible, perfectly possible, that the battle for control of the city is over, but the battle for Bakhmut will continue for some time.
5 in 6 years, Manchester City fans, old and young, delight in the Blues' latest Premier League title win.
It's actually my birthday tomorrow, and it was a brilliant birthday present with City winning the league for me.
This is ITV News with Lucy Watson.
Good evening. On the final day of the G7 summit in Japan, it was questions about his Home Secretary back home that rattled the Prime Minister. Rishi Sunak was asked repeatedly about Suella Braverman's handling of a speeding offence. She reportedly asked for advice from officials and an aide about whether she could do a speed awareness course privately as opposed to with a group. Downing Street has confirmed tonight that the PM will speak to his independent ethics advisor tomorrow about whether she broke the ministerial code. Our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports.
Suella Braverman wasn't driving as she left home today, but her actions after being caught speeding last year have raised questions about whether or not she might have broken the ministerial code. Ultimately, that will be a judgment for the Prime Minister, who was visibly annoyed at it being the first question at his G7 press conference.
Did you have any questions about the summit? I don't know the full details of what has happened, nor have I spoken to the Home Secretary. I think you can see firsthand what I've been doing over the last day or so, but I understand that she's expressed regret for speeding, accepted the penalty and paid the fine.
But before accepting the penalty points, the Home Secretary apparently asked civil servants to find out whether she could do a speed awareness course instead, and whether she could do that in private without other drivers present. Ministers are not normally allowed to involve civil servants in personal or political matters.
Would she be right to ask civil servants to help?
I'm not going to speculate on the precise details of something that I just don't know what happened in that regard. What I do know is that she's expressed regret, apologised. She'd already paid the penalty. She'd already taken the points.
If the ministerial code was broken, would that be a resigning matter?
I'm not going to get into speculation on aspects about ministerial code.
ITV News understands that when the Prime Minister returns from the G7, he will consult the independent advisor on ministers' interests, Sir Laurie Magnus. Opposition parties want a formal investigation.
Rishi Sunak should launch an investigation into whether Suella Braverman broke the ministerial code. She's got form on this. She's had to resign once before because she behaved inappropriately. Rishi Sunak reappointed her.
And a Downing Street spokesperson said the Prime Minister still has full confidence in the Home Secretary, but she is likely to face further questions about this when she appears in the House of Commons tomorrow. Carl Dinnan, ITV News.
Ukraine's President Zelensky has denied the city of Bakhmut has fallen into Russian hands, contradicting Moscow's claims that the city in the east is now under their control. He was speaking in Hiroshima on the final day of the G7 summit in Japan, where he used the opportunity to push for maximum diplomatic support, as well as more help on the ground in Ukraine. World leaders also took the chance to take aim at China, with the British Prime Minister describing the country as the biggest challenge of our age. Our Asia correspondent Debbie Edward sent this report.
In a visit filled with symbolism, The G7 briefly became the G8 again on Sunday. Volodymyr Zelensky, dressed in military green, joined a summit family photo that used to include Russia. President Putin was excluded from this alliance 9 years ago after his illegal annexation of Crimea. The Ukrainian president was the last world leader to lay flowers at Hiroshima's Peace Memorial Park. It is a sobering place to reflect on the war he is fighting, and in particular the battle in Bakhmut, which he denied has fallen into Russian hands.
Але це говорить про те, що Бахмут не охоплений на сьогодні Російською Федерацією. Ніяких двох або трьох тлумачень цьому не може бути.
President Zelensky stole the show on the final day of discussions. His placement next to the Indian Prime Minister was no mistake. He was here to appeal directly to those nations which have so far remained neutral on the war.
To see President Zelensky standing shoulder to shoulder with his G7 allies, I think sends a powerful message to Russia and the world that we are united behind President Zelensky and his people and will continue to support him for as long as it takes.
We're thankful.
There was also the opportunity to personally thank President Biden for approving F-16 fighter jets and a new package of military aid. It was the Japanese Prime Minister who invited President Zelensky. Fumio Kishida has taken a strong stance on the war in Ukraine, hoping if the time comes, Europe would support Asia against Chinese aggression.
The G7 was hosted here to demonstrate a commitment to peace. That the summit was overshadowed by war, one ongoing in Ukraine and another the world is trying to prevent over Taiwan, shows there is still a lot of work to be done. We are standing in what was Hiroshima's ground zero, and all these years later, nuclear-armed conflict is still a threat.
President Zelensky said images in the Hiroshima Museum resonated with what was happening in Ukraine today.
І я вам скажу відкрито, що фотографії зруйнованої Хіросіми саме нагадують мені, абсолютно нагадують Бахмут і інші такі містечки.
He will return to Kyiv buoyed by G7 solidarity, but impatient for the breakthrough that will end his quest for peace. Debbie Edward, ITV News, Hiroshima.
More than 5,000 miles from Hiroshima, the battle for Bakhmut continues. President Zelensky is adamant that it is still under Ukraine's control. Our correspondent John Ray is in Chasiv Yar, close to Bakhmut, and sent this update on the situation.
For a long time, it has seemed that it was just a question of time before the city of Bakhmut fell to the Russians. That victory was claimed yesterday by the head of the Wagner mercenary forces, who have been doing so much of the fighting for the Kremlin. It is perhaps a symbolic victory more than anything. The city itself has been reduced to smoking ruins. And for several weeks now, the Ukrainians have only been able to hang on in a few streets on the west of the city. But importantly, they have been taking territory on the northern flank and to the south, and holding ground where we are to the west. So it is possible, perfectly possible, that the battle for control of the city is over, but the battle for Bakhmut will continue for some time.
John Ray, with that, you report from Ukraine. ITV has confirmed Alison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary will fill in as hosts on This Morning tomorrow after Philip Schofield left the show. He announced yesterday he was stepping down from presenting the programme after more than 2 decades. His co-presenter, Holly Willoughby, will stay working on This Morning, but is taking leave until June the 5th. For the third consecutive year, Manchester City have lifted the Premier League trophy, making it 5 titles in 6 years. The players and fans knew last night they were champions. Today, it was a chance to celebrate with all supporters. The result of their home game didn't matter, but it ended 1-0 to who else but the champions. From Manchester, here's Chris Scudder.
Coronation year! Simply unstoppable. Champions for a third time in a row, having trailed Arsenal for so long, City have been relentless in their pursuit of glory. The fans came for a party and got one. City's success is no longer once in a blue moon. They're serial winners. Those who remember the bad times can't get enough.
Brilliant. It's our turn. It's our turn.
Over the years, I've been coming for 62 years. So I've seen us go down and down and down. And now this is still, even after 6 seasons, it's still so good.
Inside the Etihad, Chelsea, even bigger spenders this season than City, but with nothing to show for it, formed a guard of honour for the champions. Many of City's star names were rested, with cup finals to come, but it made little difference, and World Cup winner Julian Alvarez made it 1-0 City.
And the party is well and truly underway.
Occasionally Chelsea threatened to dampen the party, but this has been a wretched season and little joy. The final whistle was accompanied by a pitch invasion, but when it was cleared, it was all about the players' party. City, the undisputed kings of England.
Yes! That was absolutely amazing.
Come on, City!
It's a dream come true to be like sitting in the stadium watching a trophy up. It's a really dream, isn't it?
It's actually my birthday tomorrow, and it was a brilliant birthday present with City winning the league for me.
And they're not done yet. Few would now bet against City adding the FA Cup and the Holy Grail, the Champions League, for a treble that only neighbours United have ever done before. Chris Scudder, ITV News, Manchester.
Ole, ole, ole! Champions!
Now, finally tonight, in the next half an hour, a small step for space travel, but a huge leap for those on board. It will be Saudi Arabia's first ever space mission, and among the astronauts heading for the International Space Station is Rayana Banawi, the country's first female astronaut, and very soon, the first Arab woman in space. She described it as a dream come true, and that she felt like she was representing all Saudi's ambitions, all females and all researchers as well. And that is it for us for tonight. From all of us here on The Late Team, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.